Like several teams around the NHL, the Winnipeg Jets have a couple of key restricted free agent forwards unsigned right now, like Patrik Laine and Kyle Connor. Today we're going to take a look at an article from the Winnipeg Free Press discussing all the latest Jets rumors and what might be going on with those contracts. We'll get into all that coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're going to be discussing the Winnipeg Jets and what's the latest updates, latest rumors around Laine and Connor and getting them signed here. Obviously, the Jets have had to make some difficult decisions this offseason. They've lost a fair bit of players through free agency because they just couldn't afford to keep them all. Obviously, between the team and the player's success, sometimes they become victims of the salary cap, and where we didn't get a whole lot of an increase this current year, certainly made things difficult for sure. But these two players that remain unsigned for Winnipeg are absolutely huge parts of their ability to score and will be huge parts of their ability to win next year, remain competitive, and really have a possibility of being a playoff team again with the chance of being a cup contender. Obviously, they were a cup contender last year, and they fell well short of that, losing in the first round after the year before going much deeper into the playoffs. So with all that experience under their belt now, obviously they got to take a step forward or a step back this year. And what's it going to be? Well, the question will be answered by what their lineup looks like come opening night. So let's take a look at an article here from the Winnipeg Free Press and author Mike McIntyre discussing the latest in the Laine and Connor contract situations. The article starts off by saying Patrik Laine and Kyle Connor combined last year for 64 regular season goals, which amounts to just under 24% of the 272 times the team lit the lamp. And they did it on the cheap in the final year of their entry-level deals. They carried cap hits of just over $925,000 each, not including their performance bonuses. According to a handful of hockey agents I spoke to Wednesday, don't hold your breath waiting for deals to get done. There appears to be a giant league-wide game of chicken going on between high-profile RFAs and their respective general managers, with neither side wanting to be the first to blink. It's all about the top young players figuring out and defining what the marketplace is and will be moving forward. It's also about the leverage that those young players have at least before training camp and as the season begins, one agent told me on Wednesday. Indeed, players such as Laine and Connor certainly have some degree of power right now, but that can change once they start missing paychecks. You'll recall the Jets' Josh Morrissey didn't have a deal done when training camp began last fall, but there was a meeting of the minds just a few days later as they settled on a 2-year extension that pays the talented defenseman $3.15 million per season. As time goes on, as you know, the leverage swings back to the team because of the deadline in December, the same agent added. A similar situation with Laine or Connor or both would be a nightmare for the Jets, which has already lost several key pieces from a team that failed to meet high expectations last year, stumbling down the stretch and ultimately bowing out in the playoffs in the first round to the eventual Cup champions in St. Louis. Talks of potential offer sheets have mostly quieted down, with only Montreal taking a laughable run at Carolina's Sebastian Aho, only to have it backfire. It's still possible another one could come before the season starts, but it seems more unlikely with each passing day, especially with a large number of teams still looking to shed salary to get under the cap. Whether it's a long-term extension or a short-term bridge contract, the NHL has shifted in recent years to a younger man's game in which top-tier players coming out of their ELCs typically get paid. And Laine, with 110 goals in his first 3 seasons, and Connor with 65 goals in his first 2 years, are now proven goal scorers at this level. But finding the right price point that makes everyone happy and getting those deals done has become increasingly complicated. As a result, the waiting game goes on and on and on. Now, as we've discussed here with some other RFAs around the league, it does look as though that the team and the players are kind of playing a game of chicken. Nobody wants to blink first. None of the RFAs want to seem to set the market for their peers as well, which seems a little unusual. Of course, they run the risk of that they go first and some other players end up getting paid more money because of their negotiations, or maybe their agent swung a better deal, or whatever the case may be. They very well could end up leaving a fair bit of money on the table. Now, of course, there are some rumors around the league that some some teams have a little bit more leverage to get a more team-friendly contract done, like Braden Point in Tampa, for example. They've done an increasingly, steadily good job at getting their top players to take really good bridge contracts of fairly good value. I mean, look at Kucherov. It was under $5 million on a short-term deal, and then he signed for over $9 million longer term after. And of course, now we get all the rumors about Mitch Marner basically wanting the richest bridge contract in NHL history, looking for like $10 million on a 3-year term, which obviously that's a big situation looming in Toronto. But Winnipeg is a team that you don't hear as much about, but they've got just as many issues, if not more, than those other teams like Tampa and Toronto. They've been a pretty powerful team the last few years. They've had a ton of success, but these two guys are absolutely huge and instrumental to them being able to continue to have that success and score lots of goals to be victorious and work their way up the standings. So obviously, if these guys are not available come training camp, it's going to be a major blow, and we might see this Winnipeg Jets team take more steps back before it takes more steps forward. Now, we've also seen a lot of chatter around Laine in the Montreal Canadiens, at least earlier in the offseason, about the possibility of him either being traded there, that they were very interested in him, or that they might consider an offer sheet since the Sebastian Aho one was not successful. Now, since then, the Montreal Canadiens have made a lot of other moves, and they really don't have the space available right now to be doing a big-time offer sheet like that anymore. So I don't think that possibility really does exist, at least from that particular team. If you look around the league like this article references, many teams are up hard against the cap and don't have a ton of space. So the only teams that really can do this are the teams with space, which don't really seem to be the most logical teams, for the most part at least, that would really take a run at a top RFA. So I do think it's fair to say from that perspective that the likelihood of seeing another offer sheet probably is pretty unlikely. But at the same time, some of these teams that do have the options available might be waiting for that last minute swoop in here when teams don't have as much time to make moves and get their roster settled, to create space, etc., to take advantage of a vulnerable situation. I mean, if team comes in, say around, right around the time training camp's opening, and they offer sheet one of these big time RFAs, not necessarily Winnipeg, but any of them around the league for $10, $11 million or something crazy, and that team can't afford to match without making a move, they might be really in a position where they have to make a rash decision, sell really low. Other teams will take advantage, and it really could take a major hit on the team. So I do think that possibility does exist. But if it is going to happen, like I said, it'll be your last minute around any of the RFAs that might not be signed after training camp opens. At least that's my opinion here. But like this article references, I would not hold your breath on seeing deals in Winnipeg or any of the other big cities around the NHL that have existing RFAs still holding out. I mean, you've got Marner in Toronto, you've got Rantanen in Colorado, you got Brock Besser in Vancouver, Matthew Tkachuk in Calgary. You've got Braden Point down in Tampa. You've got Brandon Carlo and Charlie McAvoy in Boston. You've got Colin White in Ottawa. You've got Zach Werenski in Columbus. And the list really does go on and on and on. And I know a lot of these teams probably wanted to take care of a lot of their other UFAs or RFAs with arbitration rights first so that they could really get a better picture of what they'd have for dollars available under the cap to satisfy a lot of these contracts. But a lot of those teams have had that all done for the most part, at least, except for a few little cases here that have been coming in here the last few days. So really, there's been plenty of time to get these deals done if they were going to come to an agreement. But right now, the leverage is in the side of the player until we get closer to training camp, like the article says. Then when they start missing paychecks and start losing money, and as we know, if they miss training camp at the beginning of the year, it's going to hurt their game more than likely. Then the leverage swings back to the team, and they can usually get something done. And then, of course, with the December deadline looming after that, once the season gets underway, it just gets more and more pressure every day. And, of course, as these guys go on, if they do miss the start of the year, it means their cap hit in year one is going to be that much bigger than it would have been otherwise, like we saw with William Nylander and the Leafs last year. And that's really more bad news because it could impact their salary cap situation even more for the coming season. So theoretically, right now, the Jets do have enough money to sign these two players if they come to terms on what we consider to be reasonable contracts. But do you see them getting signed before the season starts? Do you think it's going to drag into at least training camp? And will the Jets possibly end up having to trade one of their high-profile goal scorers here if they can't come to terms to get this team back on track and hopefully take some steps forward this year instead of taking some major steps back if they can't get their players signed? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future videos. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.